Video games. What do you think is the most important part of them? Graphics, music, story, even performance? It all really depends from person to person. There's one thing that people universally, so I guess key to making a game, is make sure that the game is fun to play. This is where video game difficulty comes in. Depending on how difficult or easy a game is, it can completely shut out a particular type of audience to said game. Did you make it too easy, perhaps? People will just breeze through the game with no thought and maybe be upset at the lack of real challenge. Maybe you made it too hard. Then you've got a chunk of players who will struggle too much and will give it up and just go out and play any type of easier games. So, I hope you see how important a perfect balance is when it comes to video game difficulty. But what can be done to make sure that people know what they're getting into when picking up a game? And how can developers make sure that their games can be enjoyed by a wide variety of gamers? This and more are questions I want to answer today. So, without further ado, let's get into the first part of my discussion. When you think of a hard game, what is the first one that comes to mind? The Dark Souls franchise? Celeste? Or perhaps an older game like Pokemon Platinum? Or any that people say are harder than Pokemon, modern Pokemon at least. This is where I would like to talk about the intended by the developers. How modern people perhaps find hard, despite that not really being the intention of the actual developers of the game. Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, these are looking at people and Gamer Studios who are notorious for making tough and challenging games. If you were to pick up a game made by a studio, you probably would be aware of the challenges that await you. These games are, right down my mind, made to be challenging. You'll die over and over again, but as long as you stay determined, you can eventually beat it, and you're very fulfilled in doing so. To me, this is a very good example of a game that's made to be difficult, and it exceeds in that factor. Games designed to be challenging are everywhere and enjoyed by many. These games are not entirely unfair either. Whilst it may have some moments where the game throws an almost undodgeable attack at you, or you get locked into a vicious cycle of death time after time, you don't feel like you're learning anything, you can still beat them, of course. It just takes time when their attacks, try to build strategies, and getting used to it. This type of game appeals to people, and not to everyone. That's the best part. There's a game for everyone, and you should be free to look at reviews on games from creators who play the full binding game to know it's not for you. However, on the other side, there are games that are not designed to be incredibly difficult, but are perceived that way by some people. The Pokemon games, particularly the ones from the Nintendo DS era, come to mind here. What is it with these games that cause them to be seen as difficult by many? Pokemon games historically are pretty generous with what you have access to, and you can make any type of team what you really want. This then causes each player to have their own experiences and find certain battles tougher than others. I would say that recently, though, games have gone even more open and the number of Pokemon being catched have increased tenfold, thanks to locations like the Wild Area, Pokemon Sword and Shield, and the outright open world of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So, whilst that does make team building much more open, I do not believe team building is the only thing that sets old and modern Pokemon games apart. The EXP share and over-leveling and enemy team composition are the types of things that I believe make people see the older games as harder than they actually are. So, the older games didn't give the players as easy of a win as the newer ones, making some people see the older games as really difficult when, in fact, these older games should be seen as the benchmark of difficulty. If you do not know what I'm talking about here, let me explain. The XP share is a tool that allows for Pokemon to be given EXP, even if you're not battling. In new games, that gives EXP to all Pokemon instead of giving it to only one that holds the item. So, once it does eliminate the need to grind levels, it also can cause Pokemon to get quickly over leveled and stream through battles easily. It has gotten better in new games, obviously, but a feature like this needs to be balanced in games. So those who love fully exploring the world and battling everything they come across don't get too much XP and are stronger than they should be at that part of the game. one of my favorite games, just outright, Deltarune, I would say balances pretty well. If you choose to battle enemies, then your HP slightly increases after every battle. However, it has a cap each chapter. In Chapter 2, at level 2, the main protagonist Chris starts at 120 HP. I can get a maximum of 160 HP by fighting. You get 160 HP and you have to finish that section of the game, so you can only reach the next chapter's silent by fighting. Fighting isn't even recommended, so most players will stay at the base HP for every chapter. This system allows the players to feel more powerful than normal while still not completely breaking the game. As for my other point, the enemy team compositions were, to put it frankly, better in the old games. Let's compare the teams of Volcaner from Pokemon Platinum and Crush's team from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. As you can see, it's like night and day. Both are the final gym leaders in their respective games, but Volcaner's team is much more competent. All his Pokemon have full moves, and his last one even owns an item. But Grisha's, 3 out of his 4 Pokemon only have 3 moves, and his team lacks any health items. I can't even put the words how baffling this is. I don't think you need to. If there is anything to take away from this, it is that you do not need to dumb down games for young audiences. Children should not have to grow up playing all easy games. They should get challenged and have moments where they can solve problems without just breezing through them, alright? In many games, you present you with the choice of taking the difficulty option upon boot up. These usually consist of your simple, easy, normal, and hard modes. Perhaps they may even have an hard option for those who really want to challenge themselves. But do these really work? I mean, what are the positives and drawbacks of implementing such a feature? A good difficulty option can massively help home until you play a game, making an easy game into a much more challenging one. When you pick your difficulty at the start, it's almost always an intended difficulty, in quotes. One that the game was built around and almost always want to players pick. This type of clarity is nice, as it tells people what the other options may not be the best to play, but that's the players who want a challenge know what they're going to go for. But you see, not every game can balance this and have the player feel that they are still having fun and trying out everything they can do on each difficulty. Whereas Wooten, another YouTuber who covers top reading and difficulty, talked about this exact same thing, and I would love to bring this present experience into this. For this, I'll play about Xenoblade Chronicles 2. For the record, I absolutely love Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade Chronicles entirely. I'm really listen to the Xenoblade soundtrack while I write a script. But in the games, Xenoblade 2, the turtles and difficulty leave a lot to be desired. Xenoblade 2 has a larger variety of systems, I would say, at your disposal, which can greatly alter gameplay. Blades, items, also set of blades, fancy chart, pouch items, chain attacks, arcs, calls, in-battle commands, all power grades. You can see how this can be a lot to handle. All these systems do get used on a typical normal mode playthrough, but nowhere near to the rest of their ability. Take, as an example, you're playing a game, and you get a new element of gameplay explained to you. For example, pouch items. You put on a pouch item, read the benefits, and then forget about it. The game never brings it up again, you ignore it. I mean, do you really need to use it? It can be helpful, yes, but I mean, unless you're really playing on a hard difficulty, you can get about start up whilst ignoring it. The same goes for Poppy, a super complex and interesting cat with so many uses, but the game never bothers teaching you how useful it can really be. Considering that she's an optional party member, you may not even use her at all. It's to be solving out for someone easy to manage. You see what the issue is here. The game normally never needed mechanics to be beaten or even learned. Therefore, they get lackluster explanations and are thrown to the side like they're nothing. Perhaps, however, if the game had the difficulty option entirely, the game could push you towards them and show you really all of what the game has to offer. So, if the game difficulty option is this flawed, then what is the alternative? The most obvious answer here is simply have no difficulty settings at all, and just bounce the game around one type of game that everyone buying it will play. This allows for developers to make sure that the game is perfectly balanced for the target audience and all gameplay elements are actually used properly. Obviously, this then has its own problems. What if someone is struggling and does not have the ability to lower the difficulty, or someone's finding it too easy and enjoy it if they find it more challenging? Maybe they would want a way to have the difficulty adapt to them, or a way to actually make the game easier or harder for themselves through self-inflicted challenges, or using in-game features that can make the timing of the game a little easier. These can both work, obviously, so I would like to give my opinion on exactly how I think to implement and what can be done to make them desirable for your average gamer. Adaptable game difficulty is a type of difficulty that changes depending on how you play, so they can give you the best experience and the most fair one possible. With this, nobody has to worry about a game being too easy or too hard. You should theoretically be getting the best experience possible. We're also going to be assuming that you can change these later. So if you want a more challenge or felt like your skills were lacking, you can just change them later. Alas, this does have the same issues that normal difficulty has. Despite it seemed like a pretty good way to balance it. Okay, let's just assume that the game has plenty of managed systems and you can use the many mechanics that the game gives you to their full potential. How should adaptable difficulty best be implemented? The first thing that comes to mind is changing difficulty to play, balancing the game around constant performance. However, this has two big issues which would make it a pretty bad choice, in my own opinion. First off, starting with adaptable difficulty and making sure that the player is never really challenged. It means that the game may have a harder enemies be scaled down when it's supposed to be a challenge. As for a second issue, this would be rather hard to do anyway. Constantly scaling enemies as you play would disrupt balancing, and the developers cannot account for every single player and how they will fare in the game. Obviously, if you have difficulties that are specifically easy, normal, and hard modes, then this is never an issue, but that is not the type of difficulty that I'm talking about here. So, how should you do it right? Simply giving a recommendation instead of points changing the difficulty setting or skill on enemies would suffice. This way, it is up to the player to change how they play, and they can make the game easier or harder for themselves at their own whims. On a similar note, there are games which allow you to change almost everything about them from a settings menu. You get anything from the enemy HP to how strong you hit. This allows for the player to really customize the game to how they prefer it and act as a developer almost themselves. From a glance, this is fine, right? Don't like something, just change a party or anything you don't like in the settings. Any feature, anything really. But you see, the player can't grasp exactly how a game was made to be played. And if they go around customizing everything, then things can get really messy, to put it that way. Sections are designed to be hard, made easy, and the opposite lie as well, I'd say. However, you could argue what it's more of a capability feature, and you can always set it back to the default anyways, so as long as it's implemented properly, there isn't too many issues with it, but you really have to be careful. So, with my previous points in mind, you may be inclined to believe that it is simplest and best to have no difficulty options at all and just to let a game without how to be played. But then, you ask the question, how is a player supposed to challenge themselves if the game lacks any proper harder mode? And this, my friend, is where I would like to bring up the main types of ways that the players can help playing these games. For the simplicity's sake, I'll be calling these challenge modes, a self-played challenge that a player may take in to give himself more of a challenge. Literally. But these aren't undertaken when a game has no difficult options. Anyone seeking a challenge may do one of these when they feel like it just happens when the game doesn't actually have a difficulty option and may make the game harder. The player might make it a challenge to artificially increase the difficulty for themselves, especially if it's normally an easy game. I would say, popular type of way that players to challenge themselves is by using only one type of weapon or class. This allows people to master a certain style of play, whilst also giving themselves a decent challenge upon any sort of repeat playthroughs. Perhaps on the more extreme side are no-hit runs. In a no-hit run, the player will typically avoid all instances of getting hit or taking damage. This usually ends up with them needing to reset hundreds, if not thousands of times to get avoid getting hit. Another type of super popular challenge is one that's practiced by almost every game community, the speedrun. The speedrun is the most common and popular type of challenge as it is very simple. It has a simple premise, put it that way. Beating any set game as quick as possible. Speedruns are games evolve over time and involve a large community working together to constantly one up each other and get faster and better times. This is only helped by games that have time built in, completing games that are already about as going fast as possible. Challenge modes like that help the community for a game long after its release, and it makes people not forget about them. And since there are almost infinite ways to challenge yourself, people keep finding new and interesting things to do in the games and, well, push themselves to their full potential. So, since I wanted to touch upon Pokemon games again later, I want to end off this segment by discussing the most popular Pokemon game franchise challenge, the Nuzlocke. This was made popular in 2010 by a comic artist called Nick Franco, who documented his own challenge running Pokemon Ruby in a comic form. This challenge has 3 rules. Walks a release of Pokemon if it faints, you only catch the first Pokemon encountered in each area, and lastly, a more loose rule that everyone falls as one, you must nickname every Pokemon caught. Form a bond, of course. Once Pokemon was published, the challenge quickly became popular, joining a huge following who would do their own Nuzlocke of Pokemon games and even adding custom rules, such as not being allowed to use items or legendary Pokemon. You could say the genre is popular since Pokemon games are not particularly hard and more people can enjoy them by adding an artificial challenge. The popularity of the challenge only goes up as time goes on, proving that people want Pokemon games to be harder, and even though it is the same, the community will take it into their own hands. Speaking of Pokemon games, I want to finally do a deep dive into the issues with the difficulty of Pokemon games and what I would like to see changed. Earlier on in the video, I briefly mentioned some of my gripes with the Pokemon games and what I think the issues are with difficulty. But I now want to look at what others are saying and see if I can find something that would fix the issues and get people to actually enjoy them. Simply by looking up Reddit Pokemon difficulty, I can find a wide variety of people who are on the website Reddit are talking about Pokemon difficulty and the things that they would change. In this screenshot I'm showing on screen right now, you can see that most people are asking what difficulty settings they believe that the games are too easy for them. But below that, there is a commenter who brings up the ability to change how battles work with such settings. This setting makes it so that your Pokemon doesn't get the ability to switch out after KOing an opponent. Okay, so this could work. However, I feel like this setting just adds tedium as you almost always switch out anyway, and you just wasting getting hit. It does make things harder, yes, but it probably isn't what most people think of when you talk about making the games harder. Also, a post where someone says they don't find the game particularly hard, and then they think that people only solve your older games as difficult because they played them when they were a child and therefore less experienced. Most people definitely struggle a lot more with the games when they were younger, and the games are never hard when compared to the average RPG to begin with. The newer games are clearly easier to some extent due to balancing per enemy team composition and everything I mentioned earlier on. So, what would I do to solve this issue? First off, since Pokemon is a franchise that is mostly aimed at kids, my solution should first and foremost be something that doesn't completely alienate them. They should still be able to play the game and not get completely stuck on challenges too difficult for them. But again, my main goal is to find a way for people who are more challenged to finally get that so they can enjoy the game's full potential. The most obvious solution here is to simply add difficulty options. That's already been said countless times, so what exactly would change? The most important thing to change for Adamant was to change the teams of the opponents so they are more competent. Not only will all the trainers have more Pokemon, but they'll get a full moveset, which, especially more Pokemon battles, should cover all their weaknesses. But that's not all. Held items are an important part of battles and really change the outcome of one. Bosses like gym leaders, rival battles, even team battles got a lot of items on at least one of their Pokemon, if not all. When I was doing research into Pokemon game difficulty, I see an enemy AI be brought up a lot. As it can sometimes make decisions which don't make total sense. As a remedy for this, wouldn't make them do something and land like calling such out. But instead, I'd have them strategize more and have them use their movesets, or even the same in normal mode, to catch off players and deliver deadly moves that will cause them to think instead of effortlessly mashing the A button or flipping zero moves. And by moveset, I mean new ones. Not the old ones that are much more varied and, as mentioned, catch off the opponent's difficulty and makes them actually have more of a challenge. So, now that we've completely figured out what exactly should be changed, how do I think it should be implemented? The most obvious and easiest way to implement it is via a menu opening screen. Players would choose between normal and hard mode, probably no easy mode since the normal mode is already kind of easy, and then be able to play at the selected mode. I'd like to say that I have a much more unique idea, but I feel like it's always best when it comes to things like this. Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 already had issues of overcomplicating how you get difficulty options. To unlock them only after beating the game, but in mode of original exclusives. You unlock easy mode in White 2 and hard mode in Black 2. After unlocking the modes, the only way to play them is having it over an ODS and play it there. This is weirdly overcomplicated and talk about a mode not talked about much. If Pokemon wants to start adding difficulty options and modes, then it needs to be easy to access and something you can freely choose from when you feel about the game. Adding so many extra steps is nothing which annoys people. Obviously, Pokemon right now is more issues than difficulty, such as a complete lack of voice acting and the poor performance and graphics. But we need to make sure that the games have a challenge to impact a wider audience. Speaking of audience, my last point of discussion will be analysing the target audience of games and if the difficulty of said game matches up with what you would expect that audience to handle. So, when deciding how difficult a game should be, the most important part I would say is looking at what your target audience is and balancing the game around that. For Pokemon, this means that the game should be easier and more accessible to a younger audience. This does not excuse the games being incredibly easy, but it's an explanation for why they were never harder from the start, really. If developers don't alter audiences in their games, now a challenge is where they will eject difficulty options so everyone can play where they want. But it's not only for the older audience, though. Younger people can still want the challenge as well, so it's always great to provide options if possible. Now I want to look at the difficulty of Elden Ring, a notoriously hard game, and see if the target audience matches the way you'd expect. In the trailers, I use a dark tone and a fantasy-like one that to show off the dark story and the state of the world, only by showing you more environments and giant journey that you go on. Most of the colors are dark and have the atmosphere of the game feel uneasy and tense. This helps mix greatly with the unforgiving nature of the game and how helpless you'll feel whilst playing it. The game does a good job of targeting an older audience and appealing to them properly. The difficulty then matches your expectations. You could say that the game is same good as Pokemon, is colourful and vibrant, setting up the adventure you go on. It is aimed at a younger audience, so the difficulty and environment will reflect that. I said this before, but if the game was too hard, the alienating core fan base now would also be a terrible move. So, because of this, I made the games on the easier side so that younger audience can enjoyment out of it and beat the game by putting on like a finger or two on it for themselves and they'll just give up. So, when you play a game with a voice where it's clearly targeting your audience, understand that the reason why it's on the easier side is so everyone is also on and they can beat the game fairly. As I've said countless times, it doesn't excuse the games being easy. The other Pokemon games had a more balanced difficulty and gave you a challenge that, whilst a little difficult at first, was easily beatable with the strategy and understanding of the game and enemy. I really hope that I can get the point across that I would like a balanced difficulty in Pokemon games instead doesn't let you steamroll through them with no real challenge. I feel like the older games did it well enough, but the only issue would being too grindy. Being able to the XP share does fix this, but it should always be balanced so that you never get too high level when things get too easy. So, what is the conclusion here? Oh, difficulty option is the best choice, so should a game not be balanced off for only one mode? My main belief is that a good game should be accessible to everyone. Video games should be enjoyed by everyone. Because of this, I hope the Pokemon games and other games like can understand the algorithm fans and at minimum make the game a little more challenging, and the mode does just that. When I started making this video, so I would find the answer to the difficulty dilemma in as balanced as possible, and I think I found it. Obviously, every game is different, and one solution might not work for another, but I imagine it's simply catering towards a wider audience would work in most circumstances. You'd always put your target audience first, but always wary of the fact that everyone might want to enjoy your games as well, and they almost always will. If not a difficulty mode, give them something that challenges them, especially if it's optional and should not be forced to beat and see the game's ending. So, that's all I ever have to say. A balanced game is a good one. And a good game makes you think about a story, your actions, and maybe even who you are as a person. Video games are a form of art, and art you will enjoy by all kinds of people. I hope you have a good day, and I thank you for taking time out of your day to watch my video. Well, for now.